The last 2 decades of the 20th century were a golden age of technology. The rise of cell phones, the World Wide Web, personal computing, autonomous drones.
Change is occurring so rapidly that even those involved find it difficult to keep pace.
Witnessing every milestone was the TV series Beyond 2000. Its presenters travelled the globe, searching for innovations that would give us a glimpse into the future. Now that we're in the future, it's time to look back at the tech that did and didn't change the world. From the iconic to the offbeat.
Ready?
We're travelling back.
Fire.
Before 2000. Innovators are known for coming up with creative solutions. But in the 1980s and 90s, some veered off into territory that was truly unorthodox.
I think the 80s and 90s were this amazing time for technology because sci-fi in particular was starting to grow as a media genre. People were just thinking outside the box.
Let's see how it works.
Unexpected as they were, these inventions held the power to transform our lives.
At the touch of a button.
And with that, our ideas from the 40s and 50s in science fiction start becoming a reality.
From weird gadgets to outlandish ideas, we were offered a peek at a world we'd only glimpsed in books and movies. A future that was stranger than fiction. Exhibit A, an anti-theft invention called blazing seats.
What you've just seen is a man receiving a shock of 52,000 volts. With the alarming increase in car theft, what he's experienced could be the dramatic answer to car security. Avner Klein is the director of Point, an Israeli firm marketing this system, and he agreed to be our guinea pig. While 52,000 volts sounds very dangerous, it's not actually the voltage that kills you, it's the amperage. You'd need 40 or 50 milliamps of current to be lethal. The 7 milliamps this system puts through isn't powerful enough to be really harmful. What it does, as you've just witnessed, is render any thief or even an attacker completely harmless for a few vital minutes.
Car thefts are on the rise and people are being more and more creative in terms of how they're stealing cars. Having something like this to deter someone from stealing your car, I think is a great idea.
How do you feel, Avner?
It's like to sit on 1,000 hot nails.
It's where those hot nails are being applied that worries me. Thanks for your help. Let me give you a hand.
Thanks.
No shocks left.
This was tech makeshift enough to make even MacGyver shudder.
The unit is normally mounted underneath the steering wheel within reach of the driver. The car battery drives a high voltage coil, very much like the ignition coil in your car. The unit is connected by high tension cables to a metal grid inside this seating pad.
Look, it's not only the fact that it's trying to give people a bit of an electric shock, but it's also the way it's built. There's just exposed wires everywhere. It looks pretty dangerous.
In a taxi, for instance, the pad would cover the entire back seat, hidden, of course, under car seat covers, or even sewn into the seat during manufacture. And just in case you thought Avner was faking it,
I felt like the blazing seats were a lawsuit waiting to happen, and I also thought that they would never take on. Clearly, they had gained a little bit of popularity in Israel, but if you look at the way that he is handling that, he is so nervous. And I also would be so nervous. There is no way I'm sitting on something that can give me an electric shock while I'm driving. Even if it's really safe, I think the psychology there, it was never going to take off.
There was a similar concept in South Africa where car thefts are quite common, and it was also struck down due to litigation, and it was with flames coming out of the side of the vehicle. So electric seats, flames is a big no-no.
Protecting your car with electric shocks was one way to ensure it stayed safe. Another person might just choose secure parking. But in a city like New York, first you had to find an open spot.
How you doing?
Do you have space?
Yes, I do.
Oh, hallelujah.
And then you had to trust the valet. Things changed in 1987 when Amanda Keller trialled the world's first fully automated car park.
And here I go, proudly going where no one's ever been before.
Using tech that took parking to a whole new level.
And liftoff.
The idea of having a parking lot where we slot in cars into specific spots is a great idea. Parking lots take up a huge amount of land, particularly in the US, where this was first used.
It was a prototype electromechanical system that was computer-controlled. The platform headed straight to the parking spot designated by a personal swipe card.
Going up. First floor, ladies' lingerie. Second floor, second-hand cars. Oh, I'll have that one. And that one. Oh, I'll take that.
We've seen that if we computerize it, we are more efficient. We're able to put those cars into the right spot at the right time. And Japan actually still does this very well. You can drive your car into a parking lot in Japan, and it will take it and place it in its parking spot. And then a computer decides, how do I get that out in the most optimal way?
The main advantage of this garage was capacity, with a block that used to take 100 cars expanded to 170.
They're able to save so much space because, one, they don't need ramps, and two, the driver gets out on the ground floor. So on these upper levels, there's no need to leave space to open a door. Hang on. Oh. Craig, I'm stuck. Craig, I'm stuck.
That's New Yorkers for you, always in a hurry. And things weren't much better in London.
But there is one thing about this city that drives me crazy. Do you think you can get a parking spot in London? It can reduce grown men to a babbling mess.
But there was a grown solution. Parking hidden beneath the lawn. Meet the Autopod, a kind of automated undertaker for your car.
Well, apart from its obvious advantage of being a space saver, the Autopod is a lot more than just a cute little toy to impress your neighbours and friends. Once underground in its final position, the pod is completely waterproof, and the air and ventilation inside can be controlled to prevent any problems with rust. It also has a safety system which shuts the unit down should any person or object come into contact with this rubber.
Look, as a concept, fantastic, because it means you can bury ungainly-looking car parks beneath the ground. Unfortunately, in big cities, space is at a premium.
An electric pump connected to the hydraulic system lowered and raised the car. And in the event of a power failure, an independent lifting system ensured 24/7 access. And the roof structure was strong enough to support another car parked on top.
For me, the very best thing about the Autopod is that it leaves the yard for the more important things in life. Never could read the borrow on these greens.
Space-saving options seemed to be on people's minds all over the world. But when there was nowhere to park a car in Tokyo, ingenious minds thought completely out of the box and into a suitcase.
Mr. Kanemoto's luggage has some optional extras to really get him moving. It's a suitcase on wheels like you've never seen before.
In reaction to traffic jams and lack of parking in Tokyo, the people at Mazda created a truly compact car. One that could be wheeled on and off train platforms during a commute, transformed to a vehicle to get to the office and parked beside their desk.
So the concept, fantastic, and 30-odd kilos, also fantastic. But if you remember the original clip, the guy that was pulling it along was struggling to move the thing.
Heedless of the heft, Tracy Curo heard the call of the open road.
Can I take it for a spin?
Of course.
Thank you. Ready? Let's go. This piece of baggage is powered by a 30cc two-stroke engine. It's the same as the engine in a ride-on mower, but with better acceleration. Now, with a little bit of coaxing, I can wind it up to a top speed of 30 kilometres per hour. And that has to make it the fastest suitcase on wheels.
No helmet, no worries, as Tracy trundled onto a freeway without a care in the world. This pocket rocket even came with a stereo, or Walkman, if you could hear it over the traffic.
Look, in Japan, they do go-karting on main roads, and that to me sounds bonkers. And then when I saw this clip, I thought, this also looks bonkers.
And then, within a minute, the whole thing reverts to a suitcase. And all that's left is to fold it up, lock the latches, and you're away.
And if you'd had too much sake at dinner, well, the car in a suitcase was the only car you could take home in a taxi.
Good night, sayonara.
And if you look today at this type of concept, we have to carry fuel around to power an internal combustion small vehicle like that. Kind of doesn't really work. But where we've evolved to now is electric transportation. And now that whole concept, but electrified, I think would be a fantastic idea and perhaps be even lighter still and still achieve the same goal.
In the early 90s, a motoring transformation of a different kind was on the horizon.
That was a lot of fun. This car handles like an absolute dream. But I'm not sure about the colour. I've always wanted to do this. Hope this comes off.
Paint and Peel was made from natural rubber latex, combined with UV-blocking pigments, and could protect a car for 4 to 5 years.
Great paint job, even if I do say so myself. But now that I can see it, I think I did prefer it red.
Now, you see the appeal?
It's hard to believe that this is paint. It colours and protects just like conventional paint, but it peels off so easily. And it feels the same as a thick rubbery balloon. And what's so remarkable about this material is that it will last up to 10 months in all weather conditions.
Wacky as it seemed at the time, this product has made its way into the new century and onto our cars.
So the concept of being able to apply a wrap to a vehicle has taken off. It doesn't damage the paint underneath because you're applying it to the top layer, and they're actually using it these days as a clear coat as well to protect from things like stone chips and other damage out on the road as well. So it's a concept that works beyond just changing the colour of the vehicle.
The strangest inventions were often those that paired wild imagination with pure fun. Traditional rowing was all right, although a bit old-fashioned somehow.
But there's another human-powered craft that regularly skims across these waters, and it literally flies along at around 16 knots. Yet this unusual vessel doesn't require a large crew to generate this speed. Rather, it's driven by a single pair of legs.
Why row on the water when you could fly? This was a skeeter, a human-powered hydrofoil. A combination of engineering and aerodynamics, this craft could move 20 to 30% faster than conventional boats, all with the same amount of human power.
So effectively, the way that it works is the harder you pedal, the more it lifts you out of the water and the less resistance you have, and it means that you are effectively flying over the water.
Okay.
Sit like this.
Time to give the Skeeter a go.
Start pedaling a little faster.
I don't know if it's just because I don't like water sports, but I can see why the Skeeter didn't really take off. It's big, it's cumbersome, you have to go to a body of water, and that thing looks like hard work.
That was fantastic. But it's really hard work. I can feel my legs burning. I think I need to be just a little fitter. Whew.
But its inventor summed up the reason that the world needed Skeeters.
It's kind of a thrill. I mean, you go, you know, it's kind of neat to go that fast over the water. Normally, you're sort of plodding along, rowing, especially in something like a canoe. You're going very slowly, and this thing just goes really fast. It's like almost like biking over the water.
The only problem is you need perfectly still water. If you try and take that out into the ocean, you're not going to get very far at all.
But what if you could literally bike on the water? Well, in 1996, someone thought of that too.
I think there was a little bit of an aura around the idea of just smashing two things together back in the 80s and 90s because we could.
If you're looking for a bit of excitement, just take a motorbike, add water, and hang on. Okay, let's go.
This aqua bike had impressive stats. 125 kilos with 1,200 cc's and 3 cylinders of engine, it could fly over the water at over 100 kilometres an hour. But the learning curve for first-timers was steep and deep.
Boy, I tell you, that was some ride. This handles much more like a bike than a boat. And what makes the jet bike quite unique is its dual steering capabilities. I've got this ski at the front and also a rear jet. So even if I back off the throttle, I still have full control. And I can alter the balance between the two to get an even more radical ride.
Now, what is the jet bike? What gap is it feeling? None. But it looks cool and it goes fast. And that's what we were trying to achieve in some ways, particularly in this era where we were really optimistic about what technology could do for us.
And what technology could do for us was emulate the perfection of nature with a bionic dolphin.
It is not completely dolphin. It's a combination, actually, of dolphin, orca, and penguin.
Nature has had millions of years to evolve and iterate and find the best way to approach a niche problem. So we would be at a loss if we didn't look at nature to design things.
The concept was a reverse aeroplane. While planes used their engines and wings to keep them airborne, the Bionic Dolphin used engine thrust and the shape of its flaps to keep the craft submerged. This prototype was looking to lure the adventurous jet ski sports market with a dual on and under water experience.
The inventors hope that the power of 100 horses in this two-cylinder four-stroke outboard engine will be enough to recreate some of the movements of the Dolphin. These pectorals act like hydrofoils, giving stability whilst planing on the surface. But when you want to dive, by altering the angle of the fin, you can alter the rate of dive.
But when we start looking at water-based things, it makes sense for us to look at animals who live in the water, who know how to move through it and take advantage of the way that they're constructed.
With blowhole covers to keep the water out and 2 lungs that could be compressed with air to keep oxygen in the cavity, the Bionic Dolphin looked and moved just like its namesake.
The inventors hope to develop this further and then license it for manufacture. But that's a lengthy process and could take up to 3 to 5 years before the Bionic Dolphin is available to the public.
While there were reports of this pleasure craft going into production in around 2007, it's largely remained something out of a sci-fi movie. For a true sci-fi experience, there was one gadget that was literally ripped from the planet Vulcan and available for purchase here on Earth.
The Triorder Mark I is not a toy, nor is it a piece of junky memorabilia. It is the first environmental sensing device aimed not at scientists, but at the general public. Over the next few Earth minutes, I shall demonstrate to you some of the Triorder's more vital functions. Upon entering a strange environment, the Triorder acts as an extension of your senses. For instance, I could be in the polar regions of this planet, or merely at high altitude.
The Triorder measured air pressure and other atmospheric stats.
So I think this is a cool product because it's obviously based on the science fiction concept. And while I would have enjoyed the lightsaber instead, getting a Triorder from Star Trek makes a lot of sense because it's this item that essentially can tell us about the world from a device in the palm of our hand.
The air pressure is around 80 kilopascals, which by my reckoning should work out to be somewhere around, well, about 7,000 feet.
William who?
Light readings could be recorded in milliwatts per square metre, including infrared and ultraviolet rays.
Light seems to be filtered through a thick layer of atmospheric pollution, which in turn is also causing a sharp increase in the average temperature. Conclusion, long exposure to these environmental conditions could be hazardous to humanoid health.
The Triorder was being used in schools to learn about temperature, air pressure and electromagnetic radiation.
It's funny that 40 years later, we do that all the time. We all have devices in the palm of our hand that tell us everything about the world, perhaps sometimes too much about the world. The Triorder, in that way, is super prescient.
Innovations came in all shapes and sizes, and some even changed shape.
The robbery of armoured vans is a national pastime in many countries around the world, and usually the deed is done within a few seconds of the vehicle being hijacked. All this in spite of complex electronic surveillance devices and ever-increasing thickness of armour. But this vehicle holds some surprises for the unsuspecting felon. OK, you ready? Here we go.
Release the crime-fighting sludge. Once mixed, it expanded, hardened, and could encase any valuables in a cloud of polyurethane. The only way to retrieve the items within was by chipping it off bit by bit.
In some ways, I think we thought more things were possible in the 80s than we do now. Otherwise, we wouldn't have seen all of those absolutely wacky inventions.
These two black boxes contain monomer resins in cylinders. Now, they're maintained at a specific temperature and pressure, and there's an inbuilt security system to make sure that they don't mix prematurely. When the system is activated, a weak electrical signal fires a bullet through the lids of the canisters. The monomers mix, and the polyurethane mass forms in seconds.
Sadly, the epic Instant Army, or Instantaneous Anti-Robbery Mass Foam Yielding System, did not find mass appeal. But other outlandish ideas actually made the grade, such as the French underwear that would allow us to dance all night without that buzzkill, body odour.
But this underwear has nothing to do with the sexy, silky lingerie we normally associate with the French. This is purely functional. But its secret weapons are the tiny antiseptic molecules which have been grafted onto the fabric to fight body odour. They could just as easily, though, have been antibiotics or pesticides or fungicides, and they'll never wash out.
At the Textile Institute of Lyon, chemists were transforming fibres into miracle cloth. By adding fluorine molecules to regular cotton cloth, it became waterproof.
So we're talking about a foundational chemical change here. We're not just whacking something onto a textile. We're not just, putting something on the top and, hoping it sticks. This is a profound chemical change.
By adding fluorine molecules to regular cotton cloth, it became waterproof. And by including minute traces of copper, you could end up with a sterile cloth on which no bacteria would grow, which could have profound impacts.
One exciting place for kind of polymer grafting textiles is in the medical fields. If you can make bandages that simply can't hold bacteria and thus can prevent infection, that's a really exciting thing.
When left-of-field ideas weren't being applied to textiles, they were being focused on protecting our eyes.
Most of us are familiar with photochromic glasses. You know, the ones that go dark when they're exposed to bright light? Well, now Nikon in Japan have developed some even smarter glasses, which allow you to decide just how dark or light you want your glasses to be at the touch of a button. They go by the technical name of electrochromic device, or ECD. And as the name implies, ECDs change color at the surge of a tiny electrical current.
Yeah, so an ECD, an electrochromic device, uses electricity to essentially change the properties of light. Changing the properties of light, of course, changes what the temperature or atmosphere in the room might feel like.
So that when you press on the left button, for example, the glass starts to lighten up, and you can see how quickly it's changing. Press on the right side, and the whole process is reversed, and they start to darken up. Remove your finger, and the coloration process stops.
So this started with sunglasses, that seems pretty cool, but when you apply it to things like windows on a larger scale, you can not only bring that technology to privacy, but also things like insulation, heating and cooling, which gives you more energy efficiency, and the flow-on effect is just huge. The cool thing about technology is that you can start small and get an idea, and then figure out where that can be applied, kind of in a way that improves life even more.
Once our eyes were safe, we could focus on keeping our bodies cool.
If there's one drawback to being out on a lovely, hot summer's day, it's coming back to a stifling, sun-baked car. If you can't wait for the air conditioning to kick in, or you've got to rely on opening the windows to cool things down, then perhaps this air conditioner in a can will help you beat the heat.
Using water, a fragrance, and a chemical called dimethyl ether, it was billed as a cool miracle in aerosol form.
So Magicool is a combination of water with dimethyl. And dimethyl has a much lower boiling point to water, so it evaporates as soon as it comes out. And so as a result, you get evaporation of water at ambient room temperature, and that necessarily cools everything down.
We were encouraged to spray liberally on our skin and take it from the beach to the nightclub. If Magicool could keep our bodies cool, why not something for our heads?
Protective helmets are standard gear for motorbike riders these days. But helmets do have their drawbacks. They can get very hot and uncomfortable on a long trip. And that means fatigue, loss of concentration.
So what if you could air condition a helmet?
Inside, there's a bag of liquid that comes in contact with the top of your skull. This is the complete assembly. The liquid, you can see there, is cooled by a tiny heat pump. Excess heat is released through these metal fins as the air passes over them. It's another example of space technology reaching the marketplace.
Well, it's a great idea, except when you consider the fact of all the extra weight you're adding to your head. And if you are in a situation where you're racing a car, all of that extra weight you have on your head moves your head around, and it makes it impossible to actually operate the vehicle. It's technology that would be cool, but they did evolve helmets to actually have small air vents and to help with circulation around the head, which is similar but not quite as good in terms of the cooling effect that you would have got.
The space race may have been over, but space-age technology was all the rage. It seemed like pure science fiction at times, as humans on Earth tried to imagine a future on other planets.
In the late 21st century, we will have a number of settlements on the moon. There will be people on the lunar bases, probably the first child born in space.
I think humans have always been enamored with space. There's something about looking at the stars and seeing the world beyond ourselves that's really appealing. So it makes sense that we want to go up there and see what's what.
At the time, the technologies needed to get to other planets were fueling the research here on Earth. So much so that NASA had created a way for astronauts to practice for life in space, all within the confines of a helmet.
Well, this helmet setup is actually the first prototype that NASA built, but the researchers here at Ames found it a bit heavy and cumbersome, particularly as in a real outer space environment, everything would be weightless anyway. So they're working now with the same electronics, but in a much lighter and easier to use form.
Back in the day, virtual reality was very rudimentary. It was sort of lines and colors, that's about it.
Well, Scott, let's see how it works.
Okay, Ian, this is a fairly simple database. There are a set of escalators that are life-size. And if you take a few steps over to the one on the left and get on it just as you would a real escalator.
VR is an amazing training tool because it lets people experience things in a way that feels very real without having to go through all the effort of actually having to put them there.
Okay, you're on it now. That should take you up.
It's taking me up. What happens when I go through the top? Oh, nothing.
Now you can
Now I turn around.
You can turn around and see, look back down to the first floor where you came from.
Oh, I see.
Careful, don't
fall. Okay, so now I'm going down again. Oh yeah, and now I walk off.
It's incredible to see early iterations of VR because it's a technology that even today we consider being pretty new, but obviously it's been around for decades.
Wow, that's amazing.
Ian Finlay took just a few minutes to realise the true future of virtual reality.
There's not much doubt that NASA attaches great importance to the development of virtual environment systems like this because of their future potential in the real and somewhat hazardous environment of space. But it's difficult to avoid the feeling that they'd be just great for video games.
These days, virtual reality is like stepping into a whole other world. And if you can step into another world, you can experience things that perhaps you wouldn't be able to experience otherwise.
Our preoccupation with space saw increased confidence that the first manned trip to Mars would come soon.
It's not hard to believe that in 1987, we thought we might be living on Mars in 2-3 decades. We got to the moon, and so there was a real feeling in the air of optimism.
While getting the astronauts to and from Mars is now entirely feasible, supporting them on the way there, while they're there, and on the way back is proving an enormous challenge.
NASA realised the Mars mission would take many months in space, so scientists at Rutgers University turned their attention to making long-life space food that tasted like home.
The space program has shown that astronauts in space value food quality tremendously. Food not only provides astronauts with good nutrition, but it also provides psychological support.
By using an extruder, which was like an industrial pressure cooker, carbs, fats and proteins were combined to create meals that were nutritious, if not enticing.
This is a soy product which has been extruded as a meat analog. And to be able to come up with meat-like textures, you need to extrude it as a slit.
And you'd mix this with water, would you? Or it's quite hard. You'd pour water on it?
That's correct. You put water, and then when you put water, that pretty much becomes this chicken-like texture that you see here.
And apparently it did taste a little bit like chicken. Thankfully, there was some good news for hungry astronauts.
Oh, the one we really like the most is a pizza.
A cheeseless, meatless pie. Space seemed like a vegan's delight.
So we're still facing the same issues for extended space missions, and that is that good food is linked to good mental health and good morale. And now we might be looking at slightly different technology. Of course, 3D printing is all the rage now, and instead of extruding a pizza like they did back then, maybe we'll be 3D printing it.
And if they can just figure out some way to put extra anchovies on, you've won me.
With 3D printing still years away, soggy mush was often on the menu.
You're right, it's better than airline food, but you wouldn't get a Michelin star from me anyway.
In 1991, scientists were working on producing crisp, fresh veggies for astronauts in space.
To grow something well in space, you need to be able to grow it in a small environment, and you need to grow it without the light of the sun, and you need to grow it without much water.
Hydroponically grown with wastewater from the space shuttle showers or wash basins, these gardens would become an ideal water recycling unit.
The salad machine will also produce oxygen and take up carbon dioxide from the crew compartment.
45% of the oxygen needed for one crew member could be recycled by one full salad machine, with aims to make the spacecraft self-sufficient in food, water and oxygen for long space missions.
All the equipment for the multinational space station, dubbed Space Station Freedom, needs to fit into a standard rack. The salad machine is designed so that 4 units will fill a rack. With a bank of lights here, there'll be 1 unit below, but another one upside down above. And even without gravity, the roots will grow towards the nutrients and the leaves towards the light source, wherever that is.
But how to water plants in space?
In weightlessness, putting water into the systems where the roots are is not exactly the best way to go, because the water is floating around, mixing up with air. It's not necessarily where the roots are.
Instead, a membrane would contain the water, so the plant roots would wrap around and absorb all they needed.
By spending so much money on space, a lot of research goes into the way that we can help support people when they're off the planet. But one of the benefits of that, and one of sometimes the silent benefits of that, is that a lot of that technology ends up benefiting us back on Earth.
Take somewhere like Iceland, right? If they want fresh veggies, they have to be growing them through their winters, which are incredibly dark and cold. So with technologies similar to those developed for space, they're able to have fresh, locally grown produce all year round.
But if you were in space for a few years, there were other concerns besides what was for dinner, like clean underwear. Regular washing machines use agitation to move clothes around great volumes of water, but this wasn't possible in space. So a prototype was created that relied on a vacuum method. If only someone could demonstrate what was happening inside.
I'll use this balloon to illustrate what's happening inside the machine. The balloon is like the inflated bladder, and as we've seen, the clothes sit between the bladder and the wall. The more clothes there are, the greater the area between the bladder and the wall, and this lets more water in, so you only use as much water as the amount of washing dictates. When it's up and running, the system will use just 1 litre of water for each kilo of laundry.
We thought these space washers might be seen on places like the International Space Station, soon, but it turns out that washing your clothes is a really hard thing to do in space, and it's something we still haven't figured out. So what the astronauts on the International Space Station will do is just wear their undies for days on end, and then essentially they just get thrown out into space. So there's a disposable culture up there. They're just stinky, and then they throw them away.
If the ins and outs of space washing sounded alarming, it was not quite as bizarre as the new solar ships that were being planned for outer space.
In 1994, a group of international explorers will undertake an ambitious space voyage. They plan to sail 3 solar ships to the moon,
They use something called photonic propulsion, where basically sunlight, which is made up of photons, which are subatomic particles, hit a giant sail in numbers great enough that those tiny, tiny amounts of energy propel this thing forward in the vacuum of space.
At the time, the Americans and Europeans had plans to send these delicate solar ships towards Mars. And in 2005, the Americans finally launched the Cosmos 1 into space. But within a day, they lost contact with the spaceship.
Space sail, while a very cool technology, is also a very difficult technology. You have to launch something quite small and then have it expand in space. That's a tough concept in the 80s. It's still a tough concept now.
It seems absolutely outlandish that just light can cause something that big to move that fast and that far. But hey, sometimes technology and science is stranger than fiction.
And what about those bold predictions that we'd be living on Mars in the not-too-distant future?
If you compare the idea of going to the moon in the 60s, there was a mandate from the US government, of course, to get people onto the moon. That was really driven by a race with the USSR. But in the 80s, there was no race. There was no real reason to be sending people to Mars except just to say that we could send people to Mars. And so the social license kind of disappeared. And also, with that social license disappearing, the money disappeared.
While sending humans to Mars moved to the back burner, space exploration continued. In 2023, over $115 billion was spent globally on space programs, with benefits for science as well as for us back here on Earth. Space was, and still is, the final frontier. But the strangest inventions weren't just being developed for life on other planets.
I think that new technology always feels outlandish and that people were really pushing the boundaries. They were starting to think, hey, anything is possible, and they were getting super excited and super creative and sometimes a little wacky.
I am about to move. Please stand clear.
Back in 1992, that meant the introduction of hospital robots. Meet Reggie, an orderly serving up meals on wheels.
Reggie is an example of the most sophisticated, completely autonomous service robot. Unlike the industrial varieties that you're familiar with, service robots are not bolted to the factory floor, but they're free to roam right throughout a facility. What you see in action is a host of different sensor systems.
So doing something that for a human might be boring and maybe menial work could actually be easily replaced by a robot. They need to get fed on time, so why not get that right?
Reggie had infrared sensors checking the terrain, and proximity sensors like sonar helped to avoid collisions. An infrared transmitter could even operate doors and elevators.
Why not take the burden off humans in terms of delivering certain things that they need, like their meal?
Reg selects a basic route by referring to a map of the floor plan that's imprinted in his memory. At any one time, he knows exactly where he is in the hospital. By using the sensors, however, he's able to negotiate unexpected obstacles. Now, watch what happens when I walk in front. I break the infrared and ultrasound beams, and Reg navigates around me.
This is the magic bullet. We need quantity of health care, we need quality of health care, and we have to do it for less money, and we are. We have reduced the number of people in the kitchen by 1. It's costing us less, and the service is there. What else do you want?
Today, many hospitals employ autonomous vehicles. They've been a success here in Australia and around the world.
I think they're here to stay and only going to get better.
There were other unusual innovations in the medical world. In 1987 in Israel, the cultural practice of circumcision was doing double duty.
Interpharm Laboratories has combined tradition and science to create Frone. It's an interferon cream made of babies' foreskins. Now that may sound a little strange, but it's helping hundreds of herpes sufferers lead normal lives.
So it turns out certain viral infections, like herpes virus, can be controlled by a naturally produced hormone called interferon. It also turns out
that you can get interferon produced by cells of the body, and what better way to get cells from the body than discarded foreskin?
After circumcision, the foreskins were placed in a solution and cells allowed to grow, developing into a fibroblast interferon. This was a natural protein normally produced by the immune system.
After the cells are separated, they're put into this incubator where they're stored at body temperature. Each bottle starts with 20 million human cells, and within 1 week can multiply to 3 times that amount. Now, the cells are not in this red solution. That's the nutrients or the food. The cells are along the inside of the bottle. The bottles sit on a rotating rack. This makes sure that each cell gets its fair share of food.
So the idea was you could take the secretions from these cells, rub it on your skin, and then prevent herpes virus infection. Did it work? It turns out it worked a little bit, but the idea of using foreskin for other purported health benefits has continued.
Baby foreskin is still used in beauty products today, with foreskin stem cells being used as an ingredient in the famous penis facials loved by celebs all over the world.
But like many beauty and health products, whether they're grounded in evidence or not is still debatable. So we should probably avoid getting penis facials, yes.
From reusing foreskins, science had begun to repurpose umbilical cords as well. Technically a vein, umbilical cords were being recycled as a replacement for the femoral popliteal artery in the leg.
From the 70s, 80s, and into the 90s, we start seeing innovations that we probably would have thought were super science fiction-y back in the 50s and 60s.
In 1986, around 3,000 umbilical cords were being sent to Oakland, New Jersey each week.
Well, there are some 320 hospitals throughout the United States that participate in the program, and this is a typical sample that comes in from one of the hospitals. This one from a hospital in Grand Rapids, Michigan. So it's kept in a cold pack, like that you can see, with ice on either side. And each bottle can contain up to 100 umbilical cords.
Before they could be used in place of arteries during transplant operations, the umbilical cords were sorted, cleaned with a saline solution, trimmed and preserved so the cord was no longer a living tissue.
This is what the vein looks like at this point. It's had its arteries stripped off around the outside, and in the next stage, in a rather tricky little procedure, they put a jacket on it with this fine Dacron mesh around the outside of it. And when that happens, this is what it looks like. Like that. There it is with its Dacron mesh jacket on the outside. And that Dacron mesh is important because not only does it act as a reinforcement for the vein itself, but also it acts as an agent to which the body can bond inside the tunnel in the leg that the surgeon has to create to take the implant.
In 1986, the technology was incredibly successful.
These patients, we can use these improved materials and give them a whole new lease for their limbs and their life.
Around this time, we had a bunch of medical breakthroughs. We had a bunch of really strong technical innovations as well. We were able to start imaging people's bodies better. And so there was now an idea that people were able to live their best lives for as long as possible.
Today, we're more likely to see umbilical cords used to treat diseases by extracting stem cells from the blood left in the cord after birth. But the foundation was laid by the pioneering work of the 80s.
So, I mean, in health and medicine, a lot of the innovations we had in the 80s and 90s are still with us today. How we treat patients with transplants with certain drugs so that they don't reject their organs. The invention of the bionic organ, the eye, the ear, the limb. All of these things were advances or precursors to major advances that we see today.
Technology was finally keeping pace with ingenuity, which is why someone had the bright idea of skipping the whine of the dentist drill and taking matters into their own hands.
Imagine yourself
at a swanky cocktail party. You're chatting up an extremely charming brunette when suddenly a pistachio nut dislodges one of your fillings. What do? Well, there's no need to panic. Just reach for a packet of Dentemp, and in a matter of minutes, you can fix it yourself.
Do-it-yourself fillings seemed too good to be true. But in this era, imagination seemed as powerful as the science behind it.
Well, this takes about 10 minutes normally, so we've prepared some, which is rapidly drying in this little pill here. So I'll just press dry it quickly to make sure that it's okay. Open the jaws here. And voila, your laughing gear is back in action. A word of warning, though, for all you drill dodgers, Dentemp is only a temporary solution, so make sure you see your dentist as soon as you can. And in the meantime, why not rejoin the party?
Since long-lasting do-it-yourself fillings were still the realm of fiction, perhaps science could invent a needle-free dental experience. Trypnophobia, or a fear of needles, affects 25% of the adult population and up to 50% of adolescents. With teeth being the only part of the body that can't repair themselves, needles and modern dentistry have always gone hand in hand.
How was that?
It's fine.
Until 1995, when one dentist was working on a new technology that could finally allay our fears.
When I start to actually drill, I'll push the button on this side that gives you what I'm seeing through my helmet mount, okay? Okay.
This dentist promised painless, needle-free extractions. By sending electrical pulses through stick-on electrodes, there was no need for anaesthetic or the dreaded needle.
What should I expect to feel?
A very intense vibration. You'll feel like a hot sensation in your teeth initially. When you get up to therapeutic level, you're going to start to feel your muscles twitching, okay? Right. That's normal.
The electrostimulation cancelled out the pain, shutting the nerve gate before the pain signals had a chance to reach the brain.
Anthony, what are you experiencing right now?
It's a real tingling sensation, a bit like when your arm goes to sleep and it's coming back to life.
While this version of electrostimulation stopped pain, another quirky invention promised the opposite.
These days, you know, you can't even have a quiet snore in peace without technology trying to do something about it. But I don't snore, I hear you say. Well, if you've got a second opinion on that, you might just be surprised. No doubt this anti-snoring device has been invented not so much for the snorer, but for those that are giving the second opinion. Supposedly it works on the theory that snoring will stop for a short time if you're given a small electrical stimulus.
So shock therapy for snoring did not take off. Probably because in the end, the person snoring has to wear it, and getting woken up by a charge is probably not their idea of a good night's sleep.
This microphone, hooked onto my pajamas, connects to the unit, and at the sound of my snore, it sends a static electrical pulse into my body through these two electrodes on the back of the unit. But the pulse really is quite harmless. I can certainly feel it, but the stimulus is very light, and it only goes for about 0.05 of a second.
So there are kind of cheaper alternatives to prevent snoring or reduce snoring that have probably taken off more than the zapper. There's nose splints, there's mandibular advancement devices. In fact, I have one of those because I snore and my wife made me get one, and it works.
But for those with a more mild but still annoying snore, I don't think anything will ever replace the low-tech method of a good dig in the ribs. But of course, I don't need to worry because I'm just one of those types that doesn't snore. Sweet dreams.
Innovation and ingenuity in science often seem far-fetched.
In the 80s and 90s, I think tech had a particular flavour to it and seemed particularly strange because it was still so new.
Brilliant minds conjured ideas that enriched our lives, changed our future, and sometimes were just good fun.
Our imaginations turned from science fiction into something that we felt we could grasp almost. And it was that period of time where because of the scientific advances we'd made, we could now see into the future 5, 6, 7, 8 steps ahead into what life might be like. And that really captured the imagination of the public.
Instead of the truth being stranger than fiction, perhaps, given enough time, fiction inevitably transforms into a new version of reality.